The recent rise of the Green Party has been truly incredible, and many on the right are concerned that the Greens may keep rising in popularity. But I don't believe that the Greens can actually surpass 25% in the polls, and here's why. Now, this opinion poll would suggest that the new leader of the Greens, Zac Polanski, is actually quite popular. He overall has the best satisfaction rating out of any of the main party leaders as of November 2025. However, as you can see, he's also the least known, with 44% of people having no opinion on Zac Polanski. I would also argue that of the people who do know who Zac Polanski is, it will most likely be people who are particularly politically engaged, most likely those further on the left and further on the right. So I think the real problem that the Greens are going to face is trying to win the centre ground. And here's why I don't think they can win the centre. So this is a very interesting graph from YouGov, which tracks what the most important issues are facing the country according to the voter base over time. And as you can see, amongst all adults, the purple line, if you follow the purple line on the graph, is for immigration and asylum. So as of November 2025, you can see that immigration and asylum is, according to 53% of the voting public, the most important issue facing the country. Now, this means that it's not going to be just reform voters who believe immigration and asylum is the biggest problem, since reform is seemingly topping around 33 to 35% in the intention polls. But that means that there's another 20% or more who are voters who are not necessarily voting reform right now, but still think that immigration and asylum is the biggest issue that the country is facing. So, by that logic, the Greens would need to have a relatively popular immigration policy if they are going to win the 2029 election, or if it's called sooner, of course. But as many of you may be aware, in Parliament the other day, a couple days ago, as of when I'm recording this, Shabana Mahmood had quite a spat with Carla Denia, I think, of the Green Party in Parliament, where Denia was really angry about Mahmoud's proposals for tightening immigration. Now, you can argue as to whether Mahmoud's proposals are hardline enough, and that is, for the purposes of this discussion, irrelevant. But the fact that the Greens want basically no real immigration, like anti-immigration policy, they want to allow as many immigrants in as possible, essentially, based on, this article from the Green Party website itself. And that means that most of the moderate centrist public who haven't decided how they're going to vote next election, since the Tories and the Labour Party are obviously crumbling. What I found very interesting is that in the 2024 election, the two main Green wins that stood out for me, including Waveney Valley, which I'm showing you here, were gains from the Conservatives, not from Labour, as you might assume. And as you can see in this electoral win for the Greens last year, Labour lost 9.2% of their vote share from the previous election, but the Greens gained 32.4, which means that, assuming every single Labour voter who didn't vote Labour went for the Greens, where are they getting the rest of their votes from? You can say, okay, they're getting them from the Lib Dems. Okay, sure, that's another 6.7%. So in total, that's 15.9. Well, okay, that's another, 16 or more percent that they have to get from elsewhere. That's going to be coming from the Tories, right? Which I think is really interesting. Most of those Tory voters previously are most likely to have, to believe that immigration is one of the biggest issues in the country. So the question is as well, can they actually hold on to the seats that they've won? Because those 14,000 Tory voters in Waveney Valley, are they going to stick with the Tories? Because you would assume that a lot of them are going to move over to Reform. And can the Greens maintain the voters that they already have? Because again, some of those, at least some of those, are going to be wanting stricter immigration policies. And I think that immigration is going to be the downfall of the Greens and could very interestingly split the leftist vote between Labour and the Greens. And as we see Reform taking a harder line on immigration, we see the Tories attempting to take a harder line through people like Robert Jenrick. And we even see Labour with Starmer's Rivers of Blood speech and Shabana Mahmood's desire to be seen as hardline on immigration. It's clear to those parties, the establishment parties and the anti-establishment parties, the bigger ones, that the public want less immigration. It is clear. Zac Polanski does not believe that. Now, this article was just over a month ago in October, I believe the start of October 2025. But as you can see from Polanski's interviews since then, he is still staunchly pro-immigration. I don't see how he can win much more than he has already maintaining that view. And I don't see him changing from that view either, because he is clearly pretty ideologically left. Now, it is true that for the time being, as you can see from this graph, the Greens are really leading the youth vote, and the youth vote tends to sway towards the left. So, in part, that's not surprising. But the youth vote is also less important than the voting intentions for people, say, 50 plus, particularly for pensioners. Because as you can see here, the majority of the youth do not actually turn out for elections. Now, this is slightly old data, but it hasn't changed massively since then. In fact, voter turnout in general has gone down since this data was done. So the elderly vote, as you can see here, is massively in favour of the Tories and of reform. And the fact is that the elderly are more likely to actually vote. So, yes, you could be leading the opinion polls, or you could be gaining in the opinion polls as the Greens are. But those aren't necessarily going to vote. The people in the opinion polls, they're not necessarily going to vote. Age is important in this. And maybe the youth come out in the next election in waves to try and keep reform out. Maybe that happens. There is obviously that sentiment on social media at the moment. But I think that the real key battleground, as many people know, is going to be those local elections around May, June time. That is what is really going to, I think, show what will happen at the next election. And obviously, the deadline is 2029, but it could be earlier. It very well could be earlier if Labour keep tanking in the polls. And I guess we'll see what happens when the elections come around. So while I typically sway towards the right of politics, I hope that this video wasn't too biased in that direction. I tried to stick to the data and give an honest an opinion as I possibly can. If you guys agree or disagree with anything I've said, or have other data that might indicate the opposite of what I'm saying, or even support it, please let me know in the comments, because I'm genuinely interested. And if you've made it this far, then I assume you are too. So thank you very much for watching.